The morning couldn't have been more perfect. The sun sat just above the tree line, casting warm rays that danced across the parking lot of our small neighborhood's community center. It was one of those weekends when the market stalls popped up, vendors selling fresh honey, homemade pies, vegetables straight from their gardens, and little crafts that children had made for pocket money. The air carried a mix of roasted coffee, baked bread, and laughter. It was the kind of Saturday where everything felt slower, easier, like the troubles of the world could wait until Monday. My grandmother Margaret eased her old Buick into a parking spot close to the entrance. The car was a little beat up, but it had carried her through decades of life, and she drove it with pride. At 78, she wasn't fast anymore, and walking too far made her knees ache. She parked closer so she wouldn't have to push herself, something anyone with a shred of decency would understand. But not everyone in this neighborhood lived with decency. The Homeowners Association, what locals called the mini-government, was infamous for making lives miserable. They fined people for grass being too tall, for leaving trash cans out an hour too long, even for Christmas lights that didn't match their rules. At the top of this self-appointed empire was one woman, Karen. Everyone knew her. Everyone dreaded her. She walked with the air of royalty, as if the very streets bowed under her heels. Her sharp blonde bob was sprayed into place like a helmet, her sunglasses covered half her face, and her shrill voice could be heard a block away whenever she was berating someone for violating HOA standards. Grandma had never really crossed paths with Karen before. She minded her own business, helped out neighbors who needed a hand, and never invited drama. But as fate would have it, Karen's luxury SUV screeched into the parking lot moments after Grandma parked. She slid into the spot beside her, slamming her door wide enough that it nearly clipped my grandma as she stepped out. "Excuse me," Karen barked before Margaret even had the chance to shut her own car door. Grandma blinked, clutching her purse. "Pardon?" "You can't park here," Karen declared, pointing a manicured finger at the visitors sign above the space. Grandma frowned, confused. "It says visitors, doesn't it?" "That's what I am, visiting the market." Karen scoffed, her face twisting with irritation. "Don't play smart with me. These spots are for important visitors, not people like you." That phrase, people like you, made Grandma's eyebrows rise. She'd dealt with criminals, liars, and bullies her entire career as a police officer. She retired years ago, but that sense of justice, of recognizing contempt, had never left her. She took a breath, steadied herself, and replied calmly, "Ma'am, this lot is half empty. No one's blocked. I have every right to park here, same as you." But Karen didn't want reason. She wanted submission. Her voice grew louder, enough to draw attention from others unloading groceries or setting up tables. "Don't you dare talk back to me. I'm the HOA president. I run this community. If I say you don't belong here, you don't." Grandma shut her door firmly, then leaned on it with her arms crossed. She wasn't a large woman, but her presence filled the space. Decades of wearing the badge gave her a natural authority most people couldn't fake. She didn't raise her voice, didn't puff herself up. She simply stood her ground. "I don't know what your title means to you, but I do know this. Being HOA president doesn't make you the owner of this lot. You don't intimidate me, so maybe you should take a step back before you embarrass yourself." The crowd nearby had begun to murmur. They'd all seen Karen at work before, demanding, insulting, bullying, but very few had ever spoken back to her. The idea of someone standing their ground, especially a 78-year-old grandmother, was shocking. Karen's face flushed crimson. "How dare you? You think because you're old, you can just sass me and get away with it? No one talks to me that way in my neighborhood." Grandma chuckled, shaking her head. "Lady, I've been called worse by people twice as scary as you. Save your tantrum for someone who cares." That was the breaking point. Karen's rage boiled over. She stepped forward, her hand trembling, and before anyone realized what she was about to do, she swung. Her fist connected squarely with my grandmother's cheek. The sound was sickening. A sharp crack echoed through the lot, followed by a gasp that rippled across the crowd. Someone dropped a grocery bag, apples rolling across the pavement. Children stopped playing mid-run, conversations cut off mid-sentence. Every eye turned toward the two women. Margaret barely flinched. Her head jerked slightly, her cheeks stung, but she didn't stumble. She slowly lifted a hand to her face, rubbing the spot where the punch had landed. Her expression was more surprise than pain. Not because the hit was strong, it wasn't, but because of the sheer audacity. Karen, breathing heavily, looked triumphant. She'd expected Margaret to cry, to fall, to look weak. She smirked, hands on her hips. "That's what happens when you disrespect me," she announced, her voice loud, smug. But Karen had no idea who she'd just struck. Margaret wasn't just any grandmother. She wasn't fragile, wasn't helpless. For over 3 decades, she'd walked the toughest beats, negotiated with dangerous men, and arrested criminals who would have laughed at the sight of someone like Karen. She had trained in self-defense, had broken up bar fights, and even now in her old age, her instincts were sharp as ever. The punch hadn't broken her spirit. It had awakened something buried deep, the cop who never backed down. As the crowd held its breath, Margaret lowered her hand from her cheek and slowly fixed her gaze on Karen. Her eyes, sharp as steel, narrowed in a way that made Karen falter just a little. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Grandma said, her voice calm, but filled with a weight that silenced even the whispers around them. For the first time, Karen's confidence wavered. She shifted her weight, her smirk faltering. She didn't know yet, but the shift in the air was undeniable. Because Margaret wasn't going to let this slide. Not this insult, not this assault, and certainly not in front of the very neighbors who had long suffered under Karen's rule. The entire parking lot knew it before Karen did. This wasn't going to end the way she thought. The parking lot had gone silent, the kind of silence that makes the air feel heavy. Karen stood with her hands on her hips, grinning smugly as though she had won some sort of victory. "That'll teach you to mouth off to me," she sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. But my grandmother didn't flinch. She didn't cry, didn't crumble, didn't give Karen the satisfaction of weakness. Instead, she straightened her spine and fixed Karen with the kind of stare that had once made grown men confess crimes before even reaching the station. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Grandma said, her voice steady as steel. Karen laughed, but it came out more nervous than confident. "Oh, please. What are you going to do? Call the police? I am the authority here." The words had barely left her mouth before Grandma's training kicked in. With a swift, practiced motion, she stepped forward, hooked her arm around Karen's wrist, and twisted it behind her back. The move was so quick, so precise, that Karen didn't even realize what had happened until she was bent over the hood of her own SUV, yelping in pain. "You're assaulting me!" Karen screeched. "No," Grandma corrected coldly. "You assaulted me. This is self-defense, and I could arrest you right now if I wanted to." The crowd erupted. Neighbors who had long hated Karen's tyranny couldn't hold back their laughter. Phones were out, recording the scene, and whispers spread like wildfire. "Did you see that?" She just flipped Karen like a rookie. "That old lady's a cop?" "Oh, Karen's done for." Karen thrashed, but Grandma's grip was iron. "Let go of me," she shrieked, her voice cracking under the weight of panic. Grandma leaned down close enough that only Karen could hear. "You picked the wrong grandma." When she finally released her, Karen stumbled backward, clutching her wrist, her face pale with shock. She looked around the parking lot, searching for support, but all she saw were smirks and judgmental glares. The power she'd held over the community for years was crumbling before her eyes. I'll have you thrown out of this neighborhood," she sputtered. "I'll press charges. Go ahead," Grandma cut in, her voice ringing with authority. "I'll be happy to explain to the responding officers how you struck me first. And don't think for a second they'll take your word over mine." Karen froze, the reality of her situation dawning on her, because the truth was out. Grandma wasn't just a sweet old lady. She was a retired cop, respected by the very police force Karen thought she could manipulate. And if Karen thought the humiliation in that parking lot was bad, she had no idea what was coming next.